Hello, welcome back to my channel. Now, normally, I'm really excited to talk about this topic. Normally, I talk about theories and understanding oneself and just interesting theories about the universe and what's out there. Well, I'm enthralled about the latest movie, Reagan, 2024, and I believe I have some unique insights as a screenwriter, as somebody who spent his childhood during the Reagan presidency, and somebody who's interested in politics and interested in history. All right, I will try not to look at myself. I'm distracting myself. All right, so first I want to talk about I haven't seen the film yet. I may after this, but I don't want to bias myself seeing the movie. I already have some concrete thoughts. First, I want to talk about my reaction and thoughts to the trailer which I had seen some months ago, and then I want to talk about how I think, from what I've heard, and read, how I think the movie should have done it, rather than how apparently, from what I understand, how it was executed as a movie. All right. First of all, as I said before, I spent my childhood, I was born in 1975, and so I was approaching 10 years old during the mid part of his presidency, just as he had gone to his second term. I was approaching 10 years old. All right, so I also have a political science background. I believe I am quite objective, even though I'll say this outright. I'm left-leaning. I consider myself a Democrat. I follow I don't want to say follow. I label myself as a Democrat. And I also have, my other degree is in television, radio, and film, specifically production of film, screenwriting, production of television, blah, 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 blah. All right. So I believe I can be objective. Now, was the film a good idea? Yes, I think it's a great idea. I think that the concept of a movie about Ronald Reagan is a great idea, because I think that he was a great president. I don't mean that by great. I don't mean that he was a positive president necessarily. By great, I don't mean that he was good for the country necessarily. I simply mean that he had a tremendous impact on the country. Other presidents, I believe, who were great were Washington, Roosevelt, Truman, I would say, was a great president. Nixon was a great president in the fact that he made a major impact on the country. So if you were to take like the 40-something presidents and see which ones had more impact, Reagan would definitely be amongst them. You can't think of the 1980s without some element of his presidents being in there. Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, the Iran-Contra affair, and that dovetails into the next element I want to talk about. Well, actually, no, I'm going to talk about that a little bit further on in the second half. I want to talk about now my reaction to the trailer, just the trailer alone. I thought, first of all, this is a wonderful idea, finally, to do a movie about a biopic about Reagan. I was puzzled by, first of all, the acting seemed pretty good. They mainly focused on Dennis Quaid playing Reagan, and at times it seemed like Dennis Quaid doing a Reagan in terms of his facial contortions. But there's only so much you can do given what actors are available. I think he looked pretty good. I think the voice was pretty good. Again, you can only work with the actors available. I like the fact that they showed him recreating the famous speech, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. They included bits of the Iran-Contra affair, da 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 da. That I was happy about that. I was even happy when they showed him with his wife, and she's sitting cross-legged, as I've seen in at least one other photograph of the real couple themselves, sitting in their chairs, comfy chairs, with their TV dinner table trays in front of them. I really felt like I was seeing at least a great recreation of the way they would have actually looked. It's very important. It looked like there was some effort to recreate what it would have looked like, because it's very important now. I also believe that I am a unique voice in talking about this movie because, again, I lived through the time, and there are a lot of millennials and younger Gen Zers, so forth, critiquing this movie who were not even alive during the times depicted. My other immediate reaction was that they were going to make this into a mini-series. Is this like a 6-episode mini-series? That would have been wonderful, because they showed him as a lifeguard. They show as a young lifeguard. I've seen a photograph of him, of the real Reagan, as a lifeguard, and you see the shot of him in the trailer anyway, and I see the resemblance. There is a clear, close resemblance. And as a young child, and I could see that there was a theme there about standing up to bullies, which relates to the Reagan presidency, and I believe the personality attributes that Ronald Reagan himself had, which are important. You want a movie to reasonably accurately depict, if not necessarily each individual event, capture the soul, what I would call the soul of the main character. And the idea of standing up to a bully and the cowboy persona, I think, nicely fit and was a good effort at depicting the real Reagan. This is purely my reaction from the trailer alone, without any outside bias or other people commenting. Then they were showing so many clips that I expected this to be a mini series, like on Hulu or something, service I don't subscribe to, unfortunately. Can't afford it, or at least I choose not to afford it. Then it said in theaters, and I'm thinking, how long is this movie? Maybe they would have simply a movie about a certain period in his presidency, and that they would show flashbacks. And these clips that they were showing were flashbacks to give context and Reagan's own mental state, his memory, memory from being a lifeguard, protecting people, safeguarding people, at least from his point of view, memories of his childhood. I thought it would have him sometime during his presidency dealing with some kind of crisis or several crises, and then flashing back and giving him some willpower, or some showing him thinking about his childhood being bullied or something like that. All right. So then I read Wikipedia? I read online articles, not many, but like one or two about the movie itself, and it said I believe I read a Wikipedia article that it was based on this book, and focused primarily on his marriage to Nancy and his relationship with Nancy. And I thought, of all the stupid topics you could have picked, why take this president of the United States? Very few people, less than 50 people, have experienced what it's like to be a president of the United States. Why would you put that off to the side and focus on this relationship with Nancy? Since then, I've learned that there are clips of his presidency itself, the events in the presidency itself. That's just one person's point, I guess, put in the write-up in Wikipedia. All right. Now I want to talk about what I think they did wrong with the movie that I have not yet seen, but have seen reviews of. Apparently the movie, from what I've heard, just goes quickly, snap, 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 through the presidency, and one reviewer said that it goes so quickly through the events that you don't bond, you don't have time to bond with the subject. Now I want to talk about how what would go into creating an effectively made biopic. I don't like the term biopic. I like the term movie. It's just simply a movie that features this real person as a main character dramatizing certain events. I instantly go to the movie Ed Wood, directed by Tim Burton. It did not cover his entire life. It focused on an interesting period in his life. Hopefully in this period that you're picking for your person, historical figure, there are enough outside people, outside aspects of the total persona of this person that occurred during this period that you're covering. In any other movie, given a fictional movie, you don't cover, like for example, well, Star Wars is a huge favorite of mine. I'll pick something else. Whatever, I'd say Crimson Tide, fictional movie. You don't take the main character and then start from his birth and talk all the way through. You're going to bore the audience. There's a central message. There ought to be a central message in the movie. There ought to be central themes in the movie. It's a short, contracted period in his life where you're seeing various characters. The various characters, in some sense, represent views on what's going on. Maybe that's not the best way of putting it. Perspectives, attitudes, and opinions. Diverse attitudes and opinions, like players, like pieces on a chess game, in a chess game. They're interacting. So, that leads me to my next point. There are other movies, by the way, that have depicted into historical figures. I think of 13 Day. Well, first of all, okay, there's Kennedy, which was a mini-series, which covered a huge span of his campaign and then his presidency. There's 13 Days, which focuses specifically on the 13 days in October during the Cuban Missile Crisis. There's Ed Wood, which focuses on that specific film producing period, not even the entire film producing period. It focuses on this movie is still going, thank goodness. Okay, froze for a moment there. And there's a movie Nixon by Oliver Stone. I haven't seen the movie. I do remember that Nixon's daughters had their opinions about their father being depicted in certain ways, and that's a whole other essay. How do you accurately depict, it dovetails into this topic, I guess. How do you accurately depict a real historical figure? I believe that you should be objective, be realistic. Don't come in with a really strong bias. You should go in with a point to say. And that gets back to my idea about different characters playing different perspectives. You should have, for example, Reagan. In a movie I would make about Reagan, titled Reagan, you would go in focusing on Reagan as the main character, in other words, the character that you bond with, and also the protagonist. The protagonist is a separate role, and I talk about this in my videos about Dramatica that are already up on YouTube. But basically, there are two separate roles. The main character is one role. That's the character in whom the audience bonds and follows in the follows the journey of the story through. And then there's the protagonist who is chiefly an objective role, who's pursuing the story goal. So hypothetically, I don't know anything about the Reagan movie, really, but hypothetically, the main character might be Reagan and his relationship with Nancy, their intimate connections, or maybe some other central figure, personal in his life or personal in his presidency that he goes to, and there's a personal relationship there. That would be the main character. The protagonist might be Reagan. As protagonist, he might be pursuing a defeat of the Soviet Union. Okay, very different aspects, very different perspectives of the movie. All right. But usually they're united as a single character, protagonist and main character. All right, so here's how I would have done the movie. There are several different, first of all, I would have picked one of several different aspects or journeys through his presidency. There's the Iran-Contra affair. There's Say No to Drugs. There's the trickle-down economics. There's several different things, several different journeys through the presidency. Which one is most interesting? Which one seems to embody his presidency and his persona the best? Which one seems to have a lot of conflict, enough conflict to hold the audience's attention? Which one involves a lot of different major players, political players, during that time? Which one has suspense? Of course, as a filmmaker, which one has the most potential for visual conflict, visual depictions, visual suspense, all of that? And I think Iran-Contra, not just Iran-Contra, but more so his struggle with Premier Gorbachev and the Soviet Union, that has the most impact. That was perhaps the biggest impact he had on the country, his relationship with Gorbachev and his struggle to defeat the Soviet Union, his struggle or influence to force the Soviet Union to change, so forth, Whether you believe it was him chiefly or it was Gorbachev himself chiefly, you can't deny that Reagan did make an impact on Gorbachev or change the course of history, help to change the course of history. All right. I don't think the Say No to Drugs, his drug aspect, at least what he's remembered for, isn't as big, doesn't involve as many central figures, historic figures. It doesn't, and then you move on to his economic policies. I think it would bore the audience. You have to consider people who are not already going in knowing a lot about Reagan. You must consider there are a lot of people who, first of all, younger generations who don't know that much about Ronald Reagan, sadly. Or I should say the presidency of President Reagan. There are people who simply are not fans of Reagan. You don't want to speak only to the acolytes. You don't want to speak only to the Reagan fan people, the Reagan devotees. You want to speak to a wide audience. That's what's good about the Tim Burton movie, Ed Wood. Many people may not have known that Ed Wood even existed. I did not know Ed Wood existed until really this movie came out. I don't think I even knew that Plan 9 from Outer Space even existed. So I believe that the struggle with the Soviet Union would arguably be the best visually, the best historically, the best in terms of potential of the most conflict. So I would have Reagan, and it's very, as in sort of Reagan-esque terms, It's simplified. It embodies the persona of being the cowboy and standing up to the bully that I believe, speaking as someone who grew up, at least as a child, having an awareness of the way Reagan spoke, um, the persona of Reagan. Whether he was like that behind the scenes, I do not know. Nancy would be the only ones who knew him personally are the only ones who would even have a clue as to how accurate this persona is. But in terms of public depiction, the real Reagan seemed to be one who was, I want to say, optimistic in certain respects, perhaps blindly optimistic, and behind the scenes, I know he was very strong, he was very adamant, but in public, he always gave a smiling persona. He was an actor. He was definitely a career actor. He knew how to perform in front of an audience, and I would even include that in the movie. Perhaps even a line, something about how you have to perform as a president as well as an actor. I would definitely put that in there. So this something wide-eyed, this childlike this I don't even really know how to describe it. This optimistic view of things. I don't know if that's accurate, but this simple, going back to my cowboy thing, he definitely molded his image in very certain ways, and that plays really well to somebody who's trying to make a movie out of him, this cowboy image. So he would be the protagonist. Premier Gorbachev would probably be the antagonist, and I would focus on that. That would involve, or at least lend an empty space, lend an entry point for dealing with the Iran-Contra scandal, the Iran-Contra affair, tear down this wall, and the defeat of the Soviet Union. Now, then you would have to break it into what's Act 1. First of all, what's the goal of this movie? You don't want to cover his entire presidency or his entire life. You would want to focus on, in this case, if the antagonist is Premier Gorbachev and the Soviets, the communists, the Russians, the Marxists, you want, as Reagan or the Republicans would put it, not necessarily that Marxists are the same as communists, but the way the Republicans, the way Reagan would put it, the Marxists, the Russians, the communists, and so forth. It would be embodied in the Soviet Union, the evil empire. So you want to use terms from that, accurate to that time. It's a period piece. You're talking about the 1980s, which is within the lifetime of people living now, but it is a period piece. You want to be accurate. It's very different from modern times. So what's the goal? As with any movie, what is the goal of this movie? So that would help you construct Act 3, which would be, and then the climax of Act 3, which would be the climax of the entire movie. Would it be the fall of the Soviet Union? Would it be convincing Gorbachev to start moving towards détente and so forth? Well, already détente had been there, but perestroika. I can't remember the other term right offhand. What would be the end? What would be the final action in the climax, as with any movie? Then you should decide, if Reagan is the protagonist, what would be the action that would either successfully defeat the Soviet Union or unsuccessfully defeat the Soviet Union? And then from that final action, probably by Reagan as protagonist, what would be the events leading up to his decision to do that? And I go back to Dramatica. A movie is either built upon turning points which turn on moments of decision or moments of action. There are either certain decisions that are made that change the course of the events in the movie, or there are certain actions. That's called the driver. It's either action driven or decision driven. I would, well, it's hard to tell. I would say that, well, it's too hard to tell. You could take it either way, action driven or decision driven in this movie. You could either have a decision finally being made that results in the final result. Either Gorbachev deciding to do something with his government, or another decision that forces Gorbachev to do something with his government, change his government in a certain way. So you would have major players. You would have, of course, his wife Nancy. I don't know exactly what role she would play. Perhaps more of a personal role, personal relationship with Ronald. And I've watched Dramatica analysis sessions, and and often that comes up in these analysis sessions. What the two founders of this theory, Dramatica theory, bring up often is that is a technique to separate the main character from the protagonist. Reagan would be the protagonist going against the Soviet Union in my storyline. Ronald would be the main character. You're following his personal relationship with Nancy, or his personal feelings, his personal view. You're looking through his eyes. So a good technique is to use his first name. Same thing with a Batman movie. If you were constructing a Batman movie, Batman would be the protagonist, trying to defeat Joker. Bruce Wayne would be the main character. So, all right, going back to other main characters, obviously Premier Gorbachev, you would have spies, you would have talk of, you would certainly feature people in Reagan's cabinet, military advisors, stuff like that. You can't do a period piece without showing elements of the 1980s. And I don't mean throwing in like all sorts of 80s icons. MTV would be nice, but there's so many. It's a rich time period, and that's also why I thought Reagan would be a great character, a great figure, historical figure, to do a movie about, because of not only his impact on the country and on the world, but these other 1980s aspects, like the introduction of MTV, and also the drug aspect. There's so many, and the space program, although that had been in existence, I know, since the 1960s and really 1957 during Eisenhower and But there are just look through, and the whole phenomenon of the yuppie culture, the young yuppie culture, young urban professional. There are just so many. There was a huge impact in the 1980s from several different perspectives. So you can feature some aspects of that in the movie. So if you're not doing one movie about this period in Reagan's life, you might also do a mini-series about Reagan, which is what I would have preferred. Rather than try to truncate a whole bunch of stuff into an hour and 40 minutes, 100 minutes or something. I don't know how long. Somebody said almost 3 hours, something like that. I would have preferred to make several episodes in a mini-series. And they did this pretty well with the movie Kennedy, the mini-series movie Kennedy, which is, I think, like 2 or 3 episodes. I think the one with Blair Brown playing Mrs. Kennedy, I don't remember the other people, the other actors, but I think it was pretty well done. It covers a huge span of his life. Understandably, primarily his presidency, which wasn't that long. It was something like, it wasn't even 3 years, around 3 years. 2 years, something or other months. So I would feature, obviously, episode one, I would have him being introduced, something with Nancy running for president. Second episode, I'm trying to do this chronologically, picking offhand, um, picking the most influential moments in his life that also impacted the country. Um, his early thoughts about the Soviet Union, how it's the evil empire. I would definitely deal with the economics of the time and Reaganomics. Not that I endorse these things, I'm simply saying that they are big factors to dramatize in this period about his presidency. I would talk, so we have essentially quotes the evil empire, and we would have trickle down economics. And then a turning point where he goes towards making peaceful overtures. From what I've read about his comments to other people, witnesses, quotes that he had made to other advisors and other people during that time, that's an interesting aspect of his life, and that's another reason why I would make the movie, I'll focus the movie on his relationship with the Soviet Union, because from my understanding, he went into the presidency. First of all, he went in defeating Jimmy Carter with a campaign, in so many words, putting down Carter for being soft on the Soviet Union. He went in strong and he went in hard. You've got to stand up to a bully. So he went in. Premier Gorbachev, I believe, came in, was it during 1984? He went in with the focus on defeating the Soviet Union. And then I believe Premier Gorbachev came in around 1984, 83, something like 85 maybe. I'm a little off. I know Reagan's re-election was in 1984. So as I remember, Premier Gorbachev was after a few leaders of the Soviet Union, or at least one. I'm blanking on the former leader of the Soviet Union. I'm blanking on the name of. But there was a period when he went towards making an understanding and making a peaceful relation with the Soviet Union and with Premier Gorbachev. I believe it was the SALT II treaty. He was very personally. He from personal witnesses, he seemed very. I don't want to say very heartbroken, but very adamant and very concerned about the SALT II treaty going well. He also wanted to talk about Star Wars. I don't mean the movie, but it was nicknamed Star Wars. But the was it Space Defense Initiative, something like that, SDI, which was nicknamed Star Wars. That's why I was saying there's so many different aspects. You can't just quickly breeze through all these different events. And I would talk about the state of the economy. I mean, simply the space race alone, not the space race, the arms race alone would necessitate involving talk about the economies at the time, the difference between the United States and the Soviet Union, the economy within the United States, the recession. When he came into the presidency, there was a recession, I'm thinking back the concept of being naive. People have criticized him for a naive outlook on solving the world's problems. That's what I was talking. I was hinting at earlier, alluding to. I couldn't think of the words. You want to capture his persona. His persona, from my memory, to depict it accurately, would have been somebody who could come across either as being naive or being very optimistic, very positive speaking, also very adamant speaking, and very hard and determined. That's how I would depict Reagan. accurately and I think fairly, objectively. So I believe those are the main topics I wanted to talk about. I can't think of other things really. Maybe I'll have more thoughts after, if I see the movie, after I would see the movie. Um, I was thinking about this topic again about the the controversial action of depicting historical figures with actors. There was a great movie, and I do mean well done, and by great I do mean well done, and crucial movie to see, which was When Lions Roared. It was a two-part movie over, I believe, 2 nights. Aired in 1994, and it had, I can't remember the name of the actor, John something, I think. The one who played the father in Third Rock from the Sun. Good choice, I think, to play Franklin Roosevelt. He had When Lions Roared. It was Franklin Roosevelt, Joseph Stalin, and Winston Churchill, and you had them talking with each other in terms of them speaking their letters to each other. You'd have sometimes a split screen between the two characters, them speaking to each other. I think that technique was well done, rather than just showing somebody writing a letter and then the other person reading it and then responding. I like that. It's sort of the way they were, as if they were talking to each other through the letters. And as I said before, this thing with Reagan and his daughters speaking out when the Oliver Stone film Nixon came out. How do you fairly and objectively depict a historical figure? You would notice the good point. You would notice the what people would say the good points and the bad points of a person. You would get beneath that. You would try to get to, I shouldn't say try, you would make an effort to identify for yourself what traits about him lead to what some would consider good and some would consider bad points about him. Don't just depict the good and bad points and just alternate. Try to really get into the underneath, into the depth of the character, the persona, and that gets to acting. What motivates somebody? And in some sense, that's how I think of each person. That's how I think of real people when I interact with them. I don't think of them as good or bad people. I recognize there are these traits, these objective traits about somebody that sometimes lead to good traits and some lead to destructive, I would say constructive and destructive traits. And that also even gets to some aspects of the book of Genesis in the Bible. I didn't mean to even involve this. Good, still recording. Okay, the tree of life, good and bad. Now, the original text is Hebrew, and I can read Hebrew. The term is tov and ra. The question is, sort of academically and historically, how do you translate tov and ra? Don't go by an English translate. I mean, don't follow along with an English translation. You must go to the original source. You must read the original Hebrew and understand the original Hebrew, because translations can take the same word, translate it into one English word in this area, and translate it into a different word in a different area of the Bible, even though it's the same word, and that reflects the bias of the, or at least, at the very least, be, biased. At the very least, to say, blah, 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 whatever. The translator, to be kind, if I were to be kind in saying it, would show a bias in translating the same word two different ways, depending on which section of the Bible you're reading. All right, it's the same word. The words are tov and ra. Tov seems to be either constructive or good. What is good? I mean, what's the etymology of the word good? Um, Obviously, you're talking about the Hebrew language, you're not talking about the English language. So, what we would construe as good would not necessarily mean the same or equate to what Tov means in Hebrew. The same thing with Ra. I mean, evil carries with it Christian concepts, demonic concepts, destructive concepts. How do you interpret the term evil, which is not even the original Hebrew word? The original Hebrew word is Ra. It's depicted in several places. One place is in the tree of knowledge of Tov and Ra. Or no, actually, it's the word of in Hebrew is not included. It's simply tree of knowledge, Tov and Ra. And in the translation, people then insert knowledge of good and evil. But there is at least one moment later on in the Torah, the five books of Moses, where Yud He Vav He, translated as the Lord, and even that has a whole other set of connotations. It's not the Lord in the original Hebrew; it's Yud He Vav He, which is a specific personal name. I think, as I remember correctly, says that he will enact Ra or had enacted Ra. I believe it may be in Deuteronomy where he will enact Ra on the Israelites or on Israel. You can't. It's difficult to translate as evil in one section, Genesis, and then say that he will do evil to Israel in the next in Deuteronomy or wherever that is. That's why I'm leaning toward translating it as destruction. I guess maybe you get some sense of what the word is, but it's tricky to even if you have a sense, to put it into human terms, whether they be in Hebrew words or in English words. So I'm going off on a tangent, clearly. But anyway, I will end this right here, and don't be surprised if I do see the movie, and I'll have comments afterwards. So until next time, thanks. Bye.